Welcome back Sec 1 students. I hope home-based learning has been good so far. Okay, in today's lesson, we'll be going through your inference corrections. So there's two things I need you to have with you. Okay, number one, your March holiday homework / your checkpoint quiz. I'm going to go through the inferences first. And number two, your skills package, page 12, inference practice 4. You should have already done this because it was given to you in the last lesson. Okay, let's begin. So the first thing I'm going through is your checkpoint quiz. Now, I'm going to help you understand what is it that you should look out for, and as well, I'll help you understand the source better, and then later we'll talk about the different answers and whether they're considered valid inferences or not, and what even makes an inference valid. Okay, let's begin. First thing, okay, the question says study source A. So you should be looking at source A and not any of the other sources. Okay, next thing to look out for. It says what can you infer? So automatically you know that this is an inference question, in which case you are supposed to write your inference, evidence, and explanation as part of your one paragraph. So one IE equals to one paragraph. So if you notice, this question is 5 marks worth. So in order for you to get the full 5 marks, ideally you should have 2 paragraphs of IE and they should be different. Okay. Next thing you want to take note of is this phrase over here, Temasek in the 14th century. If I do not talk about Temasek and I talk about something completely off, automatically I will be considered to be not answering the question and therefore I will get an L1. Okay, so whatever it is, I must be inferring about Temasek in the 14th century. Now, source A, this sentence over here, okay, this is what we call the provenance. The provenance offers you details about the source, therefore you should be able to expect what the source is going to talk about. And from here, it's pretty clear, it's going to talk about Temasek. Okay, so now I'll break down the source into 3 different sentences and briefly summarize what each sentence is saying. Sentence number 1. In the 14th century, the Temasek Kingdom was a remarkable port city with a population of more than 10,000 people. Okay, so if I were to summarize this, it's famous and got a lot of people. Okay, next sentence 2. The ships from Temasek cruised through the great kingdoms and empires of Asia while supplying them with special local products that were in demand. So what it is saying is there were ships from Temasek that were sailing across many different kingdoms in Asia, and Temasek was supplying. So Temasek had those goods and they were supplying them, the kingdoms in Asia, with special local products. Means these products are only found in Temasek and therefore they were in demand. And sentence number 3. Okay, the kingdom kept a strong army that had successfully defeated a few invasions at their city walls. So from here, what I understand is number 1, we have a strong army, and number 2, there were invasions. Okay, understood the source? Now, next stage. We are going to look at some of your friends' answers and see whether or not these answers are considered valid inferences. Okay, so what I want you to do is to pause this video for a while and look at the 8 statements that are there and think about which of these are valid and which of these are invalid. Okay, and then you play back the video. Okay, I hope you spend some time thinking about whether or not these are valid or invalid. So before we even begin, let's break down the word valid first. What makes an inference a valid inference? In order for it to be valid, number 1, it must answer the question. It must be about Temasek. If not, it's not considered a valid inference. And the second requirement, it must be something that we think. Okay, alternatively, a phrasing that I would have used in class is that it must be a logical conclusion. It should not be something that we see, because if it is something that we see, that is an observation. Okay, I know my handwriting is terrible, but it's very, very hard to write on the screen, so please bear with it. Okay, now let's go through all 8 statements. First one, I can infer that Temasek in the 14th century has a strong army. Okay, what do you think? Okay, this is an invalid answer. because the word strong army is already found in the source in sentence number 3. And therefore, what this person is doing is just writing down what they see. So it's an invalid inference. What about sentence number 2? I can infer that Temasek was a strong, powerful kingdom. Okay, this one's a bit tricky, right? Technically, you see the word strong in the source. However, the word strong there is linked to the word strong army. Therefore, if there is a strong army, is it fair to think that Temasek is a strong kingdom? Yes. Therefore, this is considered a valid inference. Next, I can infer that Temasek in the 14th century was safe. Okay, do you know what sentence this person is linking it to? They are linking it to sentence number 3. Because we have a strong army that was able to defeat a few invasions, it means that Temasek was a relatively safe place. So good, person is thinking. Okay, this is a valid inference. Number 4, I can infer that Temasek in the 14th century had enemies. Okay, similar to number 3, if there are people invading us, it means that we had enemies. So again, the person is thinking. Sentence number 5. I can infer that Temasek in the 14th century supplied special local products. Okay, I think by now you should know that this is a cross because this is what the person sees. It's already in the source. In fact, its exact phrasing, supplied special products, or rather supplied special local products. Okay, but it's the same thing. Sentence number 6. I can infer that Temasek was a trading port. Okay, this is a valid inference because the source clearly says that they were cruising along many different kingdoms. And because they are cruising, I can infer that they are probably trading. I can infer that Temasek was a remarkable port city. Okay, no. It is already mentioned in sentence 1. Therefore, it's considered what you see. Okay, next. I can infer that Temasek was rich. Okay, yes. If they are able to supply special local products that were in demand, it probably means that they're getting a lot of money and therefore it is valid to infer that they are rich. Okay, I hope most of you got everything correct. Okay, but for the next stage, I'm going to go through the answers in a little bit more detail in terms of how you write in your IEE. Okay, so this is the answer scheme that we have. Okay, if you notice, if you're getting an L1, what that means is you're just describing the source, you're writing down what you see. Automatically, you'll fall to an L1. The other alternative is you gave me what we call an invalid inference. Okay, but I think for most of you, your reason for L1 is because you're writing down what you see. Okay, L2 is when you're given a valid inference, but it is unsupported. So what that means is no evidence, okay, or evidence does not support. So even though you might have given an evidence, if what you think and what you see don't match, then you're not going to get above the L2. Your evidence must be linked to your inference. Okay, in which case, most of you would have gotten 2 marks. Okay, L3, the highest level here, is when you have a valid inference and you have supported it. So I, E, and C. Okay, the higher mark is given for a well-explained answer. So those of you who got L3 4, it means that you didn't really give a good explanation, whereas those who got L3 5, your explanation is good. Okay, therefore you're getting the higher level. So look at how we have written it. Okay, I can infer from this source that Temasek in the 14th century traded with other countries. So this is considered a valid inference because it's something that I think. Okay, and then I support it with evidence. Okay, look at my sentence starters. The evidence from source A states, I quote my evidence. Okay, and at the same time, if you notice, my evidence is quoted word for word. I did not change any of the words because if I change, I'm not doing justice to the evidence. Okay, and number 3, I explain. My explanation is not just a repeat of my inference. I'm actually explaining my evidence by saying, look, this means that the ships from Temasek could have sailed to other powerful countries in order to exchange goods and engage in barter trade, showing that they traded. Okay, this is the second evidence, second inference I mean. Okay, a lot of you wrote this down. So if you're one of those who wrote it down, then take down the explanation, take down all the answers so that you can improve yourself next time. Improve yourself next time. Okay, let's move. Source B now. Okay, this time around we have a pictorial source. Let's look at the question. It says, what does this source suggest? Now I'm a bit confused. It doesn't really have the word inference in it. So is this an inference question? Okay, yes, it is also an inference question. So an inference question doesn't have to be framed as what can you infer. It can be what can you learn, what does this source suggest, what are the, okay, many different ways to phrase an inference question. But essentially, if I can tell you one tip, okay, the question starts with what. So that can be one way for you to remember that an inference question almost always starts with the word what. Okay, but here's the thing. This source is trickier because the focus is more specific. It is very specific, in fact, because it asks you specifically about trade. So it's not asking you about Singapore. The focus is on trade in Singapore. So if you tell me something like I can infer that Singapore was popular, you're wrong, because the question is asking you about trade. But if you were to say something like I can infer that trade in Singapore was popular, then you're correct. See? So make sure you use the words in the question itself to help you. Okay, that way you will not go wrong. Secondly, it says 5 marks here, so I expect 2 unique paragraphs. Okay, from the provenance, what I can tell is that it's a Singapore's trading port and it's 1300 to 1400. So we are looking at the 14th century. Now let's look at the picture. Okay, let's first describe what we see. So very clearly, it's a trading area. Okay, there's a boat at the back. There's a man here. Okay, I'm not so sure what race he is, but I'm pretty sure this is a Chinese man. Okay, this one looks like an Indian. Okay, because of his turban, so maybe he's even Sikh. Okay, and then you have probably your Malays or your Orang Laut. Okay, not too sure, but because of the attire, I can tell that. Okay, this guy appears to be holding some form of pottery. Okay, they are communicating with each other. Okay, in fact, it looks like he's smiling. Okay, as some of you identified. And then, but this side looks a bit more grumpy. Okay, so looks like they're arguing. So not so sure. Okay, but these are some things that we observe. Here we can tell that there's sea. Okay, and then we can also see a guy carrying a basket over here. So these are some things that we've observed. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to look at some sample answers again. Okay, at this stage, I want you to pause the video again and think about whether or not these answers are valid. Okay, at this stage, you should know what is a valid inference and what is not a valid inference. Okay, I hope you've just paused the video and tried it out one round. So let's look at it now. Okay, first one. I can infer that Singapore in the 14th century was a trading port. Okay, think about it. Was this mentioned anywhere in the source? Yes. Okay, it was clearly told to you in the provenance. So no, you're not thinking. This is an invalid inference. Okay, it's not a thought, it's very obvious in fact. Okay, next. I can infer that Singapore in the 14th century was multicultural. No, because the statement is not answering the question about trade. It is not about trade. It's not a valid inference in this case. Okay, I can infer that trade in Singapore was busy in the 14th century. Yes, because I see a lot of people talking to each other. It suggests that trading was busy, so valid inference. I can infer that there were people from all over the world in Singapore in the 14th century. No, not answering the question about trade. Okay, so you see what I mean by this question is trickier. If you don't talk about trade, you're wrong. I can infer that traders in Singapore engage in barter trade, okay, where they exchange goods. Okay, yes, because I see the man holding a pottery and the other Chinese man is also holding some kind of good, so most likely they are exchanging it without the use of money. Okay, so barter trade is trading of goods without money. Okay, next, I can infer that trade in Singapore was famous. Yes, because I see people from China, I see people from India, it means that trading in Singapore is famous because people from all over the world are coming over. Okay, I hope by now you have a better understanding of what a valid inference is. So here is the answer scheme. Okay, this time round, I expect a second valid inference in order for you to get the full 5 marks. Okay, because I didn't give you any sample, so you're supposed to give me 2 unique paragraphs. So as long as you give me 1 valid inference, you're at 2. If you give me 2 valid inference, you're at 3. Okay, but if you give me 2 times IEE, you'll automatically get 5 marks. Okay, I'm not going to go through the answers here. I think I've already explained it pretty clearly. So take it down in your notes and then we'll move to your package. Okay, last one. Okay, in your package. This time around, we're going to be talking about the Dutch and the Portuguese. The question says, what does the source tell you? So you notice, it doesn't say what can you infer, right? But because it starts with the word what, I can tell it is N-I-E-E. And because it is 5 marks, I need to give times 2. Okay, next thing, what's the focus? The focus is on the relationship between the Dutch and the Portuguese. So if I talk about Singapore or if I talk about Temasek, I'm gone. Okay, it's wrong. Answer is wrong. Okay, let's look at the provenance. From a historical account about the presence of the European powers in the Asian region in the 17th century. So not too much, it just tells me that this is an account of European powers. Okay, let's look at the source, sentence by sentence. Sentence number 1. With the arrival of the Dutch, the Portuguese were seriously alarmed at the vulnerability of their possessions in Asia. Okay, I know that the words are a little bit big, so I'll break them down for you. What it is saying is, when the Dutch arrived, okay, meaning they came over, the Portuguese were seriously scared, alarmed, threatened. Okay, so alarmed means these ideas. At the vulnerability of their possessions. Possession can be things like their territory, the land that they took over, okay, in Asia. So vulnerability here means, okay, normally you associate vulnerable with being weak. So in this case here, if the Portuguese are seriously alarmed at the vulnerability of their possessions, what they're trying to say is that they're very scared that the Dutch may be able to take over their possessions in Asia. Okay? Sentence number 2. The Portuguese officials were aware that the Dutch were eyeing the spice-producing islands of the Moluccas archipelago in Indonesia. So I'm going to rephrase it. The Portuguese officials were aware, they knew that the Dutch were eyeing, okay, they were looking at choosing to take over the spice-producing islands of the Moluccas archipelago in Indonesia. So the Dutch were eyeing certain lands in Indonesia. Furthermore, okay, sentence 3, the Dutch were now engaging, okay, they were carrying out acts that disrupted, okay, affected important trading routes linking Japan and China with Malaya and India. So essentially the last statement is saying the Dutch were carrying out things that were affecting the trading routes in these regions. Okay? Now let's look at some answers and see whether they are valid or not. Okay, number 1. I can infer that the Portuguese were scared of the Dutch. No, because it is not answering the question. The question is about their relationship. Do you say a person's relationship is scared? No, right? Okay, so answer 1 is wrong. Okay, secondly, the word scared is just something that we see. The person is just paraphrasing the word alarmed. So no, okay, it's not an inference. Number 2, I can infer that the relationship between the Dutch and the Portuguese was bad. Yes. Okay, throughout the whole source, you can tell that they don't quite like each other and there's a competition between each other. So yes, valid inference. I can infer that their relationship was one where they were enemies. Okay, yes. I can infer that the relationship was one where they were competitors. Yes. I can infer that the relationship between the Dutch and the Portuguese was good. No. Okay, this is an example of invalid inference. Okay, the person has misunderstood the source and thought that the source was saying something good about them. So what does a good answer look like? Okay, what you should have is at least 2 inferences with 2 IEEs. Okay, so check against your answers and write down these as corrections with green pen. Okay, however, if you're not so sure, still don't really understand, by all means approach your teachers and clarify your doubts. Okay, so same format in terms of the earlier inference question, you'll notice that to get the 5 marks, you need 2 times IEE. Okay, and each inference must be unique. So the first one that I wrote down, for example, is that they are enemies. Why enemies? Because the Dutch were threatening their possessions. So this means that the Portuguese were afraid of the Dutch stealing their possessions and therefore they are enemies. Okay, second, relationship was one where they were competitors. Because the Dutch were now engaging in acts that disrupted important trading routes. This means that the Dutch were trying to weaken the Portuguese by disrupting their trade routes and hence are competitors in trading. Okay, why is this considered 2 unique inferences? Because enemies and competitors is not the same. Okay, you're suggesting 2 different things about them. Secondly, look at my evidence. The evidence that I use here and the evidence that I use here are different. So I am making a valid inference. Okay, with that, we have come to the end of the lesson. I hope you have a clearer understanding of the inference. Not so sure, watch the video again. Still not so sure, ask your teachers. Okay, it's better to clarify the doubt that you have now than later.